Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for attending the first President's Forum for the 2013-2014 year. As you recall, we scheduled these once a month, or usually the Wednesday following a trustees meeting. We'll continue that format unless something interrupts our schedule and we decide to do an off schedule. But we did publish the dates of the remaining forums for the fall, and we plan on following that agenda. As the announcement went out earlier last week, the topics that we really wanted to address today were threefold. One was the concern that we have about enrollment and the enrollment's link to our ability to generate the number of full-time equivalent students that we're held to connect to our funding stream. So we have some concerns about the pattern that we're in right now. I also want to bring you information regarding the implementation of the Students Success Act that was passed by the state legislature, and Sandee McLaughlin will be presenting that to you today. And then there's a lot of conversation and discussion throughout the country on the Affordable Health Care Act and how it's going to be implemented, especially for employee groups of our size, because a lot of it has to do with the size of the organization, how many employees that you have. And Toni Sommer will be making the presentation regarding that. So having said that, let me just bring you up to date a little bit on a few announcements that we have. I thought the beginning of the school year has gotten off to a great start. We're somewhere a little over 9,000 students, which is a far cry from where we were in 2008-9, when we had 14,000 students. But times have changed. We've had to adjust the size of the college based around the ability to fund it. We've lost some students because of the accreditation scare. Some students chose to go elsewhere because they weren't sure of what was going to happen to Cuesta College. But those particular questions are being resolved, and hopefully that there will be a higher degree of confidence in the future of Cuesta College, and that will translate itself into continued and sustained enrollment. Enrollment is not something we can take for granted. It's something that we have to generate, and we have to work towards generating sustainable enrollment. The College Council and the Planning and Budget Committee endorsed and gave recommendation to me to move forward to hire 4 new full-time faculty positions for starting in the spring, and 10 new full-time faculty positions effective for 2014-15. So we'll be starting the recruitment process for those positions. In addition, with the new funding that we have received under the Student Success Act that Sandee will be talking more about, we also are going to be adding 1.54 equivalent of faculty in the counseling area, and we'll start a recruitment process for an additional 1.0 full-time counseling position. Today is a somber day for many of us. 12 years ago, when 9/11 attack in New York took place. And so I don't think I'll ever forget that moment, and I know that many of you were impacted in so many different ways, either personally through family or friends or acquaintances, or just for the sheer terror of something like that happening in the United States, and what that means, and the fear factor that develops within our free society, where we take for granted our ability to be free and free to make decisions and free from oppression and acts of that kind of terrorism. So we'll never forget that, and I will never forget that. Later today, we have the first of 2 sessions regarding both community and campus input on an assessment of our facilities plan for the North County campus. In 1998, we developed a master plan for the North County campus, and that was designed under a very different set of circumstances and different expectations of what was going to happen to the economy and what was going to happen to growth in the North County. What has happened is that the growth is there, the growth is sustained, and it is predicted to continue to grow in the North County as well as the South County. But the economics have changed the landscape somewhat. So we need to bring a new look. If you look at the master plan for the North County campus, it was a very horizontal sprawl across the acreage that we had, that we have there. Plus, we had a donation of an additional 22 acres for which there was a building that was planned to be built on that. That concept is no longer viable. So what we're doing now is that we're engaging in a conversation about what should the campus look like and what should we be doing next. We also have, modular buildings which are failing on us at the North County. We can't exist in those buildings very much longer. So how are we going to accommodate the needs and the programs and services that are currently being housed there? And what are we eventually going to do with CTE, with our career and technical education, which was the next building to be built? Is that still a viable next building? And what changes have occurred that might indicate or might influence the design of that building in the future? So from 3 to 5 today at the North County campus in Dallins Hall, and here in 5401 by Polycom, you can participate or listen to the conversation, and it'll be designed primarily for staff and faculty and students who want to come in and give input to our consultants, the architectural firm who we've hired to do the upgrade of the facilities plan. At 5:30, both here and at the North County, is when we've invited the public to come. Many of you probably received the postcard in the mail that went out advertising these events and opportunities for input. So we've really canvassed the North County quite thoroughly. We hope we get a good turnout of voices to kind of hear the perspective from the community as to what they see and what they feel they need in order to service the needs of the communities in the North County. So that happens today, this afternoon, and this evening. Tomorrow, we have another opportunity for all of you to participate in the beginning of the creation of the 2014-2017 strategic plan. Currently, we're in a 2-year plan, the 2012 to 2014. We've just started the second year of that 2-year plan. But in our integrated planning process, we also have to begin the procedure for developing the next plan, because we have to have that in place by the end of the fall semester, so that becomes the vehicle with which planning and budget develops the funding priorities for 14-15 and the years beyond that. So we have kind of an overlap in that last year of one plan, the development of another plan. So we have a workshop scheduled tomorrow afternoon, starts at 2:30, I believe, right here in this room. So if you want to participate, we're not creating a whole nother plan. What we're doing is we're taking a look at the existing plan. We're validating what objectives are still relevant to meeting the institutional goals that were in the educational master plan. We're also trying to identify any additional objectives that we could consider, and also what kind of strategies should we be thinking about that will help us move forward to achieving that objective. And then outside of that group, we'll be putting together some action steps and assignable responsible parties and so on. So if you have the time and you have the interest and feel an obligation to participate, then be here. All right, we'll appreciate your participation. And then on October 2nd is our next trustees meeting, and the October meeting is always held at the North County campus. So we'll be meeting there in Dallins Hall, and it'll also be polycommed here. But really, one of the real important actions that the trustees are going to be taking on October 2nd is approving the follow-up report for our warning status with the Accreditation Commission. So there's been a heck of a lot of work addressing the last pieces of our sanction, which is around the integrated planning and completing the cycle, and making sure that we've crossed every T and dotted every I. And that report will be submitted by October 15th to the Commission office. What happens after that, we will be receiving a visit from a visiting team, probably 3 people. They'll probably be here 2 days, conducting interviews and validating what we've said we've completed and done, and then making a report to the Commission after that. In the second week of January, the Commission meets to take action on all the comprehensive reviews and follow-up reports. I'll have an opportunity to attend a hearing when Cuesta College is under consideration. And as I had last January, I have an opportunity to give a 5-minute presentation or comment on why they shouldn't question our integrity and why they should automatically reaffirm our accreditation. And of course, on the heels of that, we're in the process, as many of you know, of finishing up our comprehensive self-study, which is due to the Commission office in June 15th of 2014. This happens every 6 years. So 2008 was when the last comprehensive self-study took place. That's when we went on sanction. That's when we got 9 recommendations. And here we are 5 years later, finishing and cleaning that last element up. So it's a big deal, and it's a really important exercise. It'll be a very, very big document because we have to address all of the accreditation standards, the substandards, the accreditation policies. We have to go back and comment on all of the 9 recommendations we had from 2008 and beyond to make sure that, to demonstrate that we have sustained our work, even though we were signed off on them at different points of time. We have to demonstrate that we sustained that. And then also in the 2008 study, where several planning agendas that we said that we were going to do internally in order to make improvements on standards. We have to report on whether we did that or not. And so all of that is included in that comprehensive self-study. And that's why it takes such a massive campus effort to complete that work. And so I really appreciate any of you that are here today that have been participating on a standard team or in any of those processes, because it takes everybody to do that. That's what makes the self-study so valuable. So those are some of the things that are coming up and the importance of why we're doing that. The first topic I want to talk about is enrollment concerns. We have an FTES cap. That's a full-time equivalent student cap of around a little over 8,600. It's 8,639 or so full-time equivalent students for which we get paid. But in order to get fully paid, we have to achieve that particular number. And at one time, we hit 10,000. That was in 2008-9. Well, we were able to report this year, for 2012-13, around 7,900. And you say, well, that's only 700, short. Well, 700 FTES short is huge. Because one section, a 3-unit section of 30 students in it, generates about 3 FTES. So if you divide 3 into 700, you see how many sections, equivalent sections, it would take in order for us to achieve that level. So that's a concern. Now, yes, we did do some program reduction, program elimination, program modification, but that's not necessarily the reason that we're at that point. I've mentioned one of the reasons that, well, 2 of the reasons that we're at where we are. We had to massively reduce our schedule in order to meet the funding level that we were being moved to. Because every year when we were getting budget reductions, that was being done by reducing our cap. So reducing our cap meant that we had to reduce the number of classes that we were paying for so that we were spending more money than necessary to capture the FTES. Well, part of the problem was that in concert with that, we were going through accreditation chaos. And being on show cause was a very devastating position for us to be in. So if you look at the student characteristic report that comes out from the research office, you know, one of the major shortfalls from this year from last year was our continuing students. We're down over 500 continuing students this year. Now, we don't know what that means. That could be good news. It could be that we've got people who have finished, they've transferred, they've gotten their degree or certificate, they got a job. You know, they came back to school during that economic downturn to retool, and so maybe they got enough and they went and were able to find a new job in a new field or get their old job back or whatever. So we don't know what that means. We don't know if people just were scared off. We don't know if students were disappointed in the way they were treated when they came on campus. We don't know the answers to those, specifically those questions perceived. So that is a concern, because the returning student is a critical individual, because retaining students in our organization means that's fewer students we have to go out and find to replace that student. So we have a balance between those who exit the college normally, but we also have those who exit the college prematurely. And so we need to find out, and we need to do more research on that question as to what is happening with those students. Also within our strategic plan, we also talk a lot about capturing a greater portion of the local high school graduates. We know that that overall number has been shrinking. The high school graduation rate in San Luis Obispo County has gotten smaller. So if we still maintain, let's say, a 40% capture rate of a number that's getting smaller, guess what? We get fewer students. So we, and that's why one of the goals in the institutional plan is increased capture rate. And one of the objectives we put on is a 2% increase per year. So we are looking specifically at strategies of how we can engage in a better way with high school seniors and juniors and sophomores, and create a clear pathway to Cuesta College, and actually capture that student. Not literally, but, you know. But capture that student who their first intent is to come to Cuesta College. Some high schools we get a large, you know, Paso Robles High School is our largest feeder. Should that be our largest feeder? I don't know. But right now it is. North County high schools are larger feeders than our Central and our South County by far. So we have some work to do on that. And we're going to be rolling out a program in October that I'll make a public announcement about later. We'll be having a press conference on campus on October 11th to announce another way in which we hope we'll capture students' intent, their interests, and their desire to come to Cuesta College. So we're really excited about that opportunity. So last summer we captured about 630 FTES. And summer is an interesting term. You can roll it forward to the next year, you can roll it backward, or you can split it into 2 different years. So the Enrollment Management Committee made a recommendation that if we're going to meet the cap this year, since we didn't meet it last year, we got to roll both summer 13, summer 14 inward. So we capture both ends and then do what we can to hit that 8,600 mid-year. We're probably going to be at 3550, Ryan? We're estimating we're going to be about 3550 for fall. So if you assume a similar in the spring, that's 7,100, and you capture 2,600 plus, that's another 1,300. Guess what? That doesn't add up to 8,600. So we have a gap of around 200 or so FTES. So we're going to have to come up with a different strategy for spring and summer. Maybe we need to run multiple sessions in the summer. 4-week sessions along with a 6-week session. And capitalize and multiply the opportunities for students. So those conversations are taking place right now in terms of the preparation for spring. Now, what happens if we miss the cap the second year in a row? We get reduced funding. Monterey Peninsula College is dealing with that issue right now because they missed it 2 years in a row, and right now they're trying to cut $2.5 million out of their budget right now. We can't afford to do that again. So we need to do everything we can to generate that FTES in spring and summer of next year. So with that, good news and challenge. It's just another challenge, okay? So at this point, I'd like to ask Sandee McLaughlin to come forward. Sandee's the Vice President of Student Services, and she's going to talk to us about the Student Success Act. Thank you, Sandee.
Thank you, Gil. Good afternoon, everybody. So, let's see here. Huh? All right. So in different groups or presentations, you've probably heard reference to the Student Success Act. So I wanted to go over today some more detail about that and how it's going to impact Cuesta College. This is something that started as a statewide study, the Student Success Initiative, and since then pieces have actually gotten legislated. And most recently, the full act was signed in September of 2012. So I wanted to let you know how the pieces are going to roll out. So when there was a task force initially looking at kind of this, this time of fiscal constraint, a time of concern over increased accountability, the community college's ability to show student achievement and to fully support student achievement and to really pay attention to best practices and increase the success rates of our students. And lots of professionals in the field of student services convened and looked at this topic from multiple directions. And they came up with 8 different focus areas. The Student Success Act really focuses on 3 of those. One, you'll notice as we're going through this, there's an emphasis on strengthening support for entering students. There is reference to incentives for students who are able to complete many of the mandates and requirements. And you'll see also when I show you some of the charts in alignment with new revenues to the school along with some of these mandates or requirements. I'm so used to walking around and looking back at the screen, I'm like, oh. So anyway, I'll try and get used to standing still here for a minute. So in terms of, how this act has been described, and really I want to emphasize this. This is not business as usual anymore. It's been described as a bold plan and to refocus on student success, and the fact that it's going to make important services more accessible. So, a lot of the initial work is really understanding from kind of this conceptual phase, initially with the task force, down to an act, some words that are mandates that we need to put into place. What do we really need to change? How do we need to restructure and refocus in order to meet not only the spirit of the mandate, but as you'll see later on, in order to optimize capturing the revenue to the college associated with the act? This is very tiny. I don't know if you're going to be able to read it from there, but for many years the colleges have received dollars called categorical dollars, meaning they're earmarked for specific activities for something that was termed matriculation. So the Student Success Act is focusing on a funding source, a categorical funding source that was termed matriculation. It's now the Student Success and Support Program dollars. And they've shifted it just a little bit. So previously, when there were 8 funded components and you could do like a sliver of activity in each of these 8, they've really put so much more emphasis on 3 core services. So a lot of emphasis on the orientation, the assessment, and the counseling and advisement, which includes a student educational plan. And those 3 pieces, you'll see, are actually the theme on the incentive offered to students later on in another screen, which is priority enrollment. And those are the 3 key elements. So that's going to continue to pop up over and over. But in addition to that, you'll see on some additional slides when we talk about funding, there are other types of things too, follow-up service, at-risk follow-up, those kinds of things. Previously, there were incentives for us providing these services, but not many ramifications or any ramifications to students who didn't participate. Now they're wording that in terms of these are incentives for students' participation, so that there's a driver behind all of this. There are also some limitations. When we say it's linked to student equity planning, for many years the community colleges were asked to complete a student equity plan. And what is that? A student equity plan is looking at the success rates of our students from many different angles, many different perspectives, in the sense that we disaggregate that success data and we say, what if we look at that success data maybe by age, or by gender, or by disability, or by ethnicity? Are some of our students, do they seem to be struggling more than other groups of students to be successful? And if so, what steps are we taking to remedy that? So not only are we looking, not only is this act tied to these kinds of activities for student success, but the expectation that there's going to be a research component, that we're paying attention to not only the general success rates, but this disaggregated look to success rates, and that we're addressing them in some way. Previously, even though there was an emphasis on these 8 funded components, we've been funded just by student headcount. And the funny thing about that is that we've been reporting MIS pieces. We could go to these forums, the Chancellor's Office would show us our MIS data related to matriculation, but none of it actually drove the funding. Now there's going to be some real emphasis on that. It's just going to be hard line. At the year 15-16, we are going to be funded 60%. Based on the activities that we're conducting related to the Student Success Act, in addition to headcount, 40% headcount, 60% these specific activities. And that might sound, well, okay, that seems fair. But when you look at what's being collected and how broadly we will have input into all those points, it means that many people across the campus are now going to be involved in activities related to this, but also documenting their activities. We'll need to be collecting it and auditing the results. So clearly computer services is going to be involved, as well as not just the traditional student services cluster, but individuals providing support outside that immediate cluster. And then the ARC 2.0 scorecard, this will be presented again to our board in October. These are formulas that basically is conducted through the research office looking at the success rates, and these are made public for people to judge the success of our operations here at Cuesta. One of the things that we need to think about, there's so many layers in terms of how we should be delivering student services, so we always need to be mindful of the accreditation standards and then thoughtful about how we link the intent of the Student Success Act to the expectations in accreditation and the delivery of student services. So even though the Student Success Act is placing so much emphasis on the front end, on entering students, what we see more frequently than ever with accreditation is the word pathway. How are we supporting students from those initial support services to ongoing support service to assure that they all have the success and persistence that we'd like them to have? So that's an additional challenge. As we're designing one piece, we need to be mindful of the whole picture. So more little writing. But basically what this talks to us about is in the year 12-13, we were made aware that the pieces of the overall study were going to be legislated into an act, and we were going to have to begin implementation. So it was important for us to know and be mindful of the intent of the discussions without knowing the specifics. And now the specifics are unrolling. And for many of us who, we know this layer of specificity, and we really want to know now the more detailed layer, we're being directed to a conference that is on the 23rd and 24th of this month, just almost a little over a week away, where some of these implementation details are supposed to be defined. And each college is asked to send 3 representatives, so Candy Munoz, the Director of Counseling, myself and Eric McDonald with Computer Services will be going, and we're compiling long lists of the kinds of questions that we feel that we need answered in order to be successful in doing this. So in the fiscal year 13-14, the allocation does not shift, but we have that year to start getting the infrastructure in place, knowing what the collection points are going to be and the kinds of activities we should be conducting. In 14-15, we'll be putting, that data is going to be, that's basically not only the trial run, but what we put in 14-15 is going to drive our 15-16 allocation. So even though 15-16 seems so far away, it's really tomorrow when you look at the timelines of trying to get all the pieces into place, and we look at an academic year and our opportunity to get all of that information in there. But trumped by all of this, coming up even more quickly is priority enrollment. So going back to the funding formula, when I talked before about previously 100% had been on head count, even though there was this expectation that we conduct activities, matriculation activities at a district, and we were audited to assure that we were providing those. Now there's the proof in the pudding right here is we need to document it when we actually do these pieces so that on the 60% side, we will be funded for the expected activities. So this assigns the value to that 60% funding. So the upfront services, orientation assessment, and an abbreviated SEP, that's 30%. Those are called the upfront services. As the definitions are rolling out, an abbreviated SEP can be as little as 1 semester, but it needs to be with an informed academic goal. It needs to be with some level of guidance, and we'll get more clarification on this. By the time a student completes 15 units, they're expected to have a comprehensive, which we're all pretty familiar with. That's a multiple semester student educational plan. And as you see, that's weighted much more heavily at 35%. At-risk follow-up services is primarily directed at students who are not in good academic standing, meaning they're on academic probation, and it's an opportunity for us to link them to the critical services they need to turn that situation around. And then there's a whole other layer of just other follow-up services, which are support services. One of the pieces that we started focusing on immediately as all of this was unveiled was taking a look at our orientation process, knowing that, as you see also the enrollment priorities, students attending or being part of assessment, orientation, and having a student educational plan, they're going to need all 3 of those in order to meet the priority registration components. And so we needed to take a look. We knew we were doing lots of orientation activities across the campus, but how were we going to document students' participation in that? These programs on the right that are all listed there as special program orientations, we're not necessarily putting those into a system associated with a student name and with this particular activity. We did identify the one point where, thankfully, due to the good work in counseling, we were a little bit ahead of the curve, because many districts are looking for an online orientation program, and we've already had one in place. So one of the things we immediately looked at was that opportunity, and we said that if we can have all these individuals who are on these special programs assist by notifying their students that before they get involved in those programs, they're going to be advising them to do the online. We're looking at as many strategies as we can to assure that students take advantage of that opportunity and thereby are in line for priority enrollment. So, bringing all those folks together is a little bit of a challenge, and Candy's done a good job with thinking that through and meeting with individuals. I think on one level, people are thinking, okay, I guess I need to do a little something different with orientation, and then the months come on and people kind of start to fall into their old habits. So we really need people to think about the impact of this, and if the student that you served is not documented as participating in your orientation, or you forgot to refer them to the online, when they go to register in fall 2014, they will have lost their priority registration. So again, these, as we move to the enrollment priorities, this is kind of the backup information in terms of what the community colleges system felt that this would provide us. And part of this, again, is encouraging students to identify their educational objective early on. That's been really different than, the activities of a lot of our students. They're here because they want to test the waters, see what they're interested in, try a little bit of each. And as I mentioned in another presentation recently, I really remember a conversation with a student that I had who was a 4.0 that I was able to introduce at commencement, and he told me what he valued so much about community colleges and Cuesta College was the ability to test different disciplines and really help discover his passion so that he could be successful with what he wanted to do later in life. And he's since then successfully transferred to Cal Poly in business. But this is really moving us in a different direction, providing the kinds of information to students that can better help them define earlier on at the community college what their educational goal is, and then lining up coursework to go along with that. So not only does it talk to us about having priority registration, but it talks to us about specific groups that should qualify. So this is legislated, okay? So what it means is we take our priority registration board policy and we set it next to this new legislation and we start making these adjustments. And Kristen Pimentel has been leading that effort and we'll be having an updated board policy in the very near future. It's been vetted with many groups across the campus. But in the very top group are the military and veterans and also our foster youth. And then next is the existing Title V group, EOPS and DSPS. There's also been even more recent legislation adding Cal Works into the priorities, but we haven't received clarification as to whether they're in the number 1 or number 2 group yet. And then by the time you get to the number 3 area, they do let us incorporate some of the priorities that we've already established. But there's the caveat that these need to be fully matriculated students when they're in the number 3 category. So what is, again, fully matriculated means individuals who have gone through assessment, who have participated in orientation, and who have a student educational plan. One of the big questions that I have to take up to this conference in the near future is about our continuing students. If we didn't have the infrastructure in place to record all the various ways that we assessed individuals' readiness for courses, such as transcript evaluation, and yet now enroll, and that's not going to be mandated for another year out, what happens to them in this priority enrollment cycle? Those are the pieces that we're working on because we want to give all of our students the best advantage possible. You better not be telling jokes over there, right? So again, here's the definition of fully matriculated. And what this means, Ryan's supposed to be helping me figure out how to do this, but how many of our students out there don't have a student educational plan that's currently in the system? I'm looking for that number. We know it's huge, and it's huge. So going back to Dr. Stork's comment, this is why one of the first steps we've taken, we anticipate an augmentation or have been notified of an augmentation of in excess of $300,000 for the current fiscal year, 13-14. One of the first pieces we addressed was augmenting or adding to the counseling potential. This has to be, this is not, business as usual. We need to attack it in a different way. We're also, thankfully, we've had some technology developed in counseling, but we're going to be looking at the degree audit program that was prioritized in planning and budget as a high priority. That will help address this. We're looking at other strategies and working with students to how to handle a larger volume and still have it be the kind of quality that we would like. Now, there are also some limitations. This seems probably logical if people on one end are talking about students need to declare an academic intent earlier on. That seems like now people are thinking of some kind of a timeline. So students will lose their priority registration after priority enrollment opportunities after they've completed 100 or more college-level courses or college-level units. And there's always going to be an appeal process. But this means that, that focused intent and kind of attention to a student education plan is going to be more important than ever. And then an increased emphasis on academic standing. And one of the things that they're doing with the academic and progress probation is they're aligning this with the same, that the student with the Board of Governors grant, that academic standing will be aligned with this. There'll be the same definition and the same appeal process. So this talks about the appeal process, who may appeal and under what conditions. So that has to be formalized and in place by the time we start registering students. Yeah, and this piece is the piece that's a little bit startling because this is the front runner. Enrollment priorities is running ahead of the rest of the student success program implementation, and yet 3 of the components that are required to receive enrollment priority are part of the MIS data reporting that we're trying to have in place for actually 1 year out. So a lot of our scurrying around is to really wrap our arms around how to give students the best advantage and make sure that we've asked the right questions and that we have as much data into the system as we can. And again, we'll try and get some clarification. But we've already hit one of these milestones, and that was in 2013 in spring. We were supposed to notify, which we did, students of the new requirement and the new mandate and what is in place and how they can take advantage of it, and we did send that out to students. Did anybody over here remember getting that very important email? Okay. Good, Charles. And we'll send that again this semester for those students who weren't enrolled last spring. And now we've got the board policy revision, and we're putting all the other pieces, addressing them as quickly as we can. To give some idea of the impact of this, and this isn't an all-inclusive to-do list, but I always have my highlighter with me. So one of at the top is implementing priority registration. You've heard that that's a big project, even though we make it sound little. Coordinating academic progress with those students receiving the Board of Governors. Banner backlog, we have lots of projects through computer services that we've all thought up over the years that far exceed our capacity to implement them. And now some of those are directly tied to the implementation of this program, so we need to reevaluate some of our priorities. And that includes the work orders and the MIS. We have board policy that needs updating, and it's not just the priority registration board policy. We have taken a look and will continue to really focus and work on centralizing and coordinating the orientations. We hope to implement the degree audit program, which will give students so much more information online, especially if they're bringing in units from other colleges and/or our degree requirements are shifting. They'll be able to see specifically which of their courses are applying and do not apply to the degree that they're interested in, so that they're much more prepared when they sit down with a counselor to actually understand kind of the intricacy of all of these pieces and how they fit together when they're putting in together the comprehensive. Our employees across the campus are going to need to be trained on which of these activities qualify and how it is that they'll be put into the system, and we'll be auditing that information. Restructuring student services, part of the proposals that I'm now unfolding have to do with how we want to address staffing with the remaining funds of the $300,000 beyond the counseling. augmentations we've talked about. And one of the things that was communicated to us is if we are using the I call it the 3SP dollars for a position that falls within these mandates, that we need to make reference to that in the position descriptions. That would be part of an audit. And so, so that all of us understand and stay on top of this, I'm making presentations in numbers of different forums. So to give people the opportunity to ask questions, and for me to think about what else I need to ask about so that we're all fully informed. Okay. Any questions? Probably don't have time for questions.
Thank you very much, Sandee. As you see, there's a lot wrapped up into this piece of legislation that affects a broad spectrum of the college community. And equally as impacting and yet more fuzzy is the Affordable Health Care Act. And Toni's going to give us an insight as to what we know at this point and how it might affect us. So thank you, Toni.
Good afternoon. There is a lot to know about the Affordable Health Care Act, and there's a whole lot none of us know. In fact, when I first was becoming familiar with it several years ago, the joke was that who was going to benefit from affordable health care was attorneys trying to figure out what the act really said. And so there's been a lot of work done at the federal level and at state levels and now at the employer level for implementation that is due to be implemented in 2014. And basically the idea is to give opportunity for health care, medical health care, to as many citizens in the United States as possible and help those people, in fact, who have pre-existing conditions. We're lucky enough to work for an employer that, in fact, provides health care, but it's not necessarily the case. And I think the biggest problem that's going to be for us, and we're still trying to figure out and waiting for direction, is who are we required to provide health care for. At this point, we're pretty much covering the people that need to be covered, and it's usually determined by people who work more than 30 hours a week. We even provide partial health care to 50% loaded faculty and 50 and 75% staff. So in that case, we're pretty well positioned. The two variables for us are going to be that what is considered the working hours for adjunct faculty. Is it they have a 3-unit course, which is 3 hours a week, and therefore we only employ them 3 hours a week? Is it the fact that there's prep time, and are they going to give credit for prep time towards those hours? And that really changes it a lot. At this point, we're more than covered if, in fact, it's a 50% load, which would be considered either 20 hours a week or in the case of teaching them so many hours. There is talk, though, for certain professionals, which include adjunct faculty and airline pilots, and I always forget the third category, well, they may define those differently. In that case, we will have to be ready to absorb whatever impact fiscally that would be on the district. We are a little bit better off than most community college districts because we are unique in that we at least give partial benefits currently to our faculty. Most districts don't, and they would have to absorb that whole cost. We don't know the answer to that question yet. The other one that's a big variable for us is when we deal with temporary employees. We will have to report monthly on the hours of every employee at the district, permanent or temporary. And if, in fact, a temporary employee exceeds 30 hours a week, they could be eligible for that month for health care. And so not only will there be a back and forth in and out of the medical plan, there will be extreme tracking that will have to go into this to make sure we do it properly. And again, that's to be worked out. About 60 days ago, there was a huge announcement that they were going to postpone some of the elements of the Affordable Health Care Act. All they did was postpone the required reporting. We still have to do the tracking, and it's just that we won't have the required reporting. So I'm not quite sure what they did suspend. But more importantly to everyone that works here, and I'm looking at the time, is you as individuals, none of the requirements of individuals have been pushed back. So I'd like to go through that really quick, if you don't mind. So basically, what are the next steps in the implementation? And that's basically bringing up what they're calling the marketplaces. Every state is being asked to set up a marketplace where people can go and shop for health insurance. And that's a key part of this new. And it's going to start in late September. You will be receiving this letter in the mail. I highly recommend you pay attention to it. One of the things that's going to be required of individuals, starting with your tax return, and in fact the IRS is beefing up the number of agents that they're hiring, is every individual, you know how when you register your car you have to show you have insurance? On your tax return you will have to show you have medical insurance, or you will be subject to a fine. Now that fine could be passed on to the employer if not affordable, and there's a definition, affordable health care is offered. But if you choose not to take it or not go to the marketplace and find health care, you will be fined for not having health care. So that's why this letter is really important. So what is the marketplace? It's designed to help find insurance that meets personal needs and budgets. So the idea is you kind of shop around and see if you can find something that matches your budget. It's sort of one-shop comparable shopping. And you might find that you qualify for some tax credits, and those are based on income. So again, that becomes a very important task that you will have to do. And the open enrollment for coverage through this marketplace starts October 1st with coverage starting January 1st. So again, you have an opportunity to meet the requirement that you must have health care. Okay, so can you save money? You may, like I said, you may qualify for a tax credit or money that will help lower your premiums, but only if your employee does not offer coverage that meets certain criteria. We, at this point, the Benefits Committee has been tracking this for 2 years, will offer at least a single plan that will, in fact, meet the criteria. So if you choose not to take that plan, then your option is to either pay the fine or find something else at the marketplace. And the savings depends on your household income. And basically, the rule of thumb is that your out-of-pocket cannot be more than 9.5% of your household income. How we're doing it here at the district is we're making the assumption to be on the safe side that you are the sole contributor to your household income, so we're making sure we're offering at least one product that our lowest paid employee will in fact not have to pay more than 9.5% of their income out of pocket. Okay, so does the employer health care affect the eligibility? Yes, okay, meaning that we can help you, or you can go to the marketplace. But, and I read the fine print, because I'm going to read you the fine print, okay? Does employer health care coverage affect eligibility for premium savings through the marketplace? Yes. If you have an offer of health coverage from your employer that meets certain standards, which we are ensuring we do here at Cuesta, you will not be eligible for a tax credit through the marketplace and may wish to enroll in your employer's health plan. However, you may be eligible for a tax credit that lowers your monthly premium or a reduction in certain cost sharing if your employer does not offer coverage to you at all or does not offer coverage that meets the standards. So again, it's really important, and I'm more concerned, I know I have health care, quite frankly I'm concerned for my adult children to make sure that they know this, because not all of them do. So it's good to pay attention to this letter so you will know for yourself and for your family and friends. And what's minimum value? And it basically, there's a definition here, but we're using the rule of 9.5% of household income. We have no intention nor desire, though we may be forced to in the future, to have to audit your household incomes. I'm not quite sure you'd be willing to give me that information. But the IRS knows your household income. So note, if you purchase a health plan through the marketplace instead of accepting coverage offered by your employer, then you may, this would be negotiated obviously with our unions, but according to federal law, then you may lose the employer contributions, if any, to the employer offered coverage, which is often excluded and used from income from federal and state income tax purposes, meaning that any benefits or any contributions we make by federal law don't have to be allowed to be moved to the marketplace. Again, I said obviously that would be negotiated in this case, yes. Yes, and what's really interesting about the legislation, it's really good about including dependents, but the legislation does nothing for spouses, okay? Which, it's interesting, I don't know if we assume that all spouses work, but yet everybody has to have coverage. And in fact, some major companies, UPS being one of them, are actually dropping spouses from their offerings of health care because they're no longer required to. Okay, so that's why this is really important you guys pay attention. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so make sure you have your insurance. Okay, if you need more information, our benefits office, we've been going to every seminar we can actually go to, and the state of California marketplace is coveredcalifornia.com, and the federal website is healthcare.gov. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Toni. As you can see, it raises a lot of interest because it has so many tentacles that affect us in very different ways. So thank you for coming today. I hope you enjoyed the quality and the level of information that was shared. Please inform your colleagues that this video will be posted on our video site on our college website under YouTube and for everyone to participate in. So have a great day. Thank you.
Careful what you ask for.